The Council Station of the Deathworld Alliance was an architectural marvel that defied conventional description. Like a cathedral built by aliens who had only seen Las Vegas in fever dreams. It combined cutting-edge technology with ostentatious decoration. Crystalline spires jutted from massive industrial sections, while holographic banners rippled across walls embedded with data interfaces. The central dome, nearly 2 kilometers in diameter, housed the Grand Council Chamber, where representatives from 100 worlds gathered to debate matters of interstellar policy. Captain Elena Maris stood at one of the observation decks, her newly pressed diplomatic uniform still uncomfortable across her shoulders. She absently adjusted the silver insignia of Earth's diplomatic corps while taking in the spectacle below. Various alien species moved through the Grand Promenade, some floating, others crawling, a few using mechanical assistance. Their forms were as diverse as their home planets. Yet they shared one thing in common. All came from worlds classified as death worlds by the old galactic standards. Impressive, isn't it? The voice belonged to Ambassador Krill, a tall, willowy being with skin that shifted between blue and green depending on the light. 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern, studied Elena with barely concealed curiosity. Your first time aboard the station, Captain Maris? Yes, Ambassador. Elena turned, offering the formal bow that her briefings had indicated was appropriate for Krill's species. Earth is honored to join the Alliance. I hope my service as diplomatic liaison proves beneficial to all parties. Krill's skin rippled in what Elena recognized as the equivalent of a dismissive shrug. We shall see. The council meeting begins in 3 hours. Until then, you're free to explore public areas of the station. A pause. Only public areas. Of course. Of course, Elena replied, keeping her expression neutral despite the clear warning in Krill's tone. I wouldn't want to violate any protocols on my first day. After Krill departed, Elena consulted her datapad. Earth had joined the Deathworld Alliance just 6 months ago, after centuries of isolation following humanity's first disastrous contact with alien life. The Alliance, a coalition of species from planets considered hostile or dangerous by galactic standards, had approached Earth with promises of mutual protection and technological exchange. What nobody mentioned was Earth's classification, Deathworld Level 12, far higher than any other member world. The central terminal in her quarters had indicated only that the welcoming ceremony would take place at 1800 hours station time. That left nearly 3 hours to familiarize herself with the station's layout. Elena's orders from Earth Command had been explicit. Maintain a diplomatic presence, build alliances, and, most importantly, discover why Earth had been invited to join when so many other applications had been rejected. The promenade level featured representatives from dozens of species, moving between shops, eateries, and information kiosks. Elena noted how many paused to stare at her as she passed. Humans were still a novelty here. You look lost, said a raspy voice behind her. Elena turned to find a being that resembled a 2-meter-tall praying mantis, though with additional limbs and a carapace that shimmered with embedded technology. Not lost, Elena replied. Just taking it all in. Ah, the new human representative. The mantis-like alien performed a complex gesture with its upper limbs. I am Technician Vern. I maintain environmental systems on levels 30 through 42. Captain Elena Maris, Earth Diplomatic Corps. She attempted to replicate the gesture, but knew she'd failed when Vern's mandibles clicked, in what might have been amusement. Close enough. You're early for the ceremony. Most representatives spend their first hours in their quarters, studying protocols. Elena smiled slightly. I prefer hands-on learning. An interesting approach. Vern's compound eyes glinted. Would you care for an unofficial tour? The official guides will show you only what the council wishes you to see. Elena hesitated just long enough to make it look like she was considering the offer, rather than jumping at the opportunity. "I'd appreciate that. Technician Vern, lead the way." As they moved through the less crowded corridors of the station, Vern provided a running commentary on the various sections, species, and unspoken power dynamics of the Alliance. Elena listened attentively, filing away information that hadn't been included in her briefing materials. "The Alliance was formed out of necessity," Vern explained, as they entered a maintenance corridor that offered glimpses into various chambers through transparent sections. Species from harsh worlds were often exploited or marginalized by those from more temperate environments. The Deathworld classification system was originally used against us, a way to restrict immigration, trade, and political representation. "So the Alliance reclaimed the term," Elena noted. "Precisely. What was once used to exclude became a badge of honor. Our strength, resilience, and adaptability became recognized assets." Vern paused before a security door. "However, not all politics is so straightforward." The door opened to reveal a compact control room filled with monitors. A few other technicians, of varying species, glanced up briefly before returning to their work. "This is one of the environmental monitoring stations," Vern explained. "From here, we adjust atmospheric conditions throughout the station to accommodate various biological needs." Elena observed the screens, noticing how they displayed different sections of the station, each with atmospheric composition readouts. Quite a complex system, necessary for coexistence. Vern moved to a terminal and input a series of commands. One screen changed to display a classification chart. "This might interest you." Elena stepped closer and felt her blood run cold. The chart showed the Deathworld rankings of all Alliance members. Earth stood alone at level 12, far above the next highest, Vern's homeworld at level 8. "This can't be accurate," she murmured. "It is," Vern replied, voice lowered. "Your world is considered the most dangerous habitat in known space. Why do you think the Grand Council was so eager to bring humans into the fold?" Before Elena could respond, an alarm chimed softly from one of the other terminals. Vern quickly closed the display. "We should leave. Security scans this section regularly." As they exited back into the maintenance corridor, Elena's mind raced. Something wasn't right. The briefings had mentioned Earth's classification as unusual, but hadn't specified the extreme disparity. "Why show me this?" she asked once they were clear. Vern's mandibles clicked softly. "Not all of us agree with current council policies. Some of us believe in transparent governance." A pause. "Be careful at the ceremony tonight. Captain, questions about classification are discouraged." With that cryptic warning, Vern led her back toward the public areas, pointing out various features of the station architecture, as if they'd been discussing nothing more significant than tourist attractions. Elena returned to her quarters with an hour to spare before the ceremony. She immediately activated her secure communication link to Earth Command, requesting any additional information on Deathworld classifications. The response was frustratingly vague. "Classifications are determined by council committees based on multiple factors. Earth's specific metrics remain classified." The welcoming ceremony took place in the Grand Council Chamber, a vast circular space with tiered seating that accommodated representatives from all member worlds. At the center stood the speaker's platform, where Grand Chancellor Paliki, a massive, six-limbed being with iridescent scales and multiple sensory organs, presided over proceedings. Elena took her designated position, conscious of hundreds of alien eyes studying her every move. The human delegation was small, just Elena and two assistants who had arrived separately. They stood out starkly among the diverse alien forms. Grand Chancellor Paliki raised two of his 6 limbs, and the chamber fell silent. "Representatives of the Alliance, we gather to formally welcome Earth into our coalition of Deathworld species." Paliki's voice boomed through translator nodes positioned throughout the chamber. For too long, Humans have remained isolated, their potential contribution to galactic stability unrealized. Today, we correct this oversight. Elena listened as Paliki continued with flowery diplomatic language about cooperation, mutual benefit, and shared challenges. Nothing in his speech addressed the question burning in her mind. Why Earth's extreme classification? And why now? The ceremony proceeded with ritual exchanges of symbolic gifts and formal acknowledgments from various committee heads. Elena performed her role as rehearsed, presenting Earth's official acceptance of Alliance membership while scanning the assembled representatives for reactions. Most seemed merely curious, but she noticed a group near Paliki that watched her with what appeared to be calculating interest. One in particular, a serpentine being with a cranial crest that pulsed with bioluminescence, never took its multifaceted eyes off her. As the ceremony concluded, representatives moved to an adjacent reception area where refreshments suitable for various biologies were served. Elena circulated as expected, exchanging pleasantries and responding to curious questions about Earth. Many seemed particularly interested in human physiology, asking questions that bordered on invasive. "Is it true humans can regenerate damaged tissue without medical intervention?" asked a gelatinous being that communicated through color patterns on its translucent surface. "To a limited extent," Elena replied carefully. "Minor wounds heal naturally, yes." "And you can ingest substances that would be lethal to most species?" "Some, though that's hardly unique. Every species adapts to its environmental challenges." The serpentine being she'd noticed earlier approached, its movement creating a small wake in the crowd. "Captain Maris," it said, voice melodic, despite coming through her translator. "I am Chief Advisor Paliki. My purpose is to assist new members in navigating Alliance protocols." Elena bowed slightly. "I appreciate any guidance you can provide, Advisor." "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. They moved to a quieter section of the reception area, where security personnel maintained a discreet perimeter. "Your world's inclusion was controversial," Paliki said without preamble. "Some council members expressed concerns about human unpredictability." "We can be adaptable," Elena acknowledged, "but we're committed to Alliance principles." "Adaptable?" Paliki's crest pulsed with colors that her translator didn't interpret. "An interesting choice of words. Tell me, Captain, what do you know about the classification system?" Elena maintained her diplomatic expression. "Only that it categorizes planets based on environmental hazards, indigenous life forms, and other risk factors. A simplified explanation, but accurate enough. Earth's classification is unique. No other world combines such lethal environmental conditions with sentient life forms capable of interstellar travel." Paliki leaned closer. "It makes many nervous. Then why invite us to join?" "An excellent question." Paliki's multifaceted eyes caught the light. "One best left unexplored for now. Focus on integration. Learn our ways. Demonstrate that humans can conform." The threat beneath the words was unmistakable. "Of course," Elena replied smoothly. "Earth values this opportunity." "Good." Paliki's crest rippled. "A final piece of advice. The station contains many restricted areas. They are restricted for good reasons. Security measures here are unforgiving." With that, the advisor glided away, rejoining Paliki's entourage. Elena spent the remainder of the reception in careful conversation, building a mental map of allegiances and tensions. By the time she returned to her quarters, she had identified at least 3 factions within the council. Those who seemed genuinely welcoming of Earth, those openly suspicious, and a group that maintained calculated neutrality. What she couldn't determine was why her planet's classification mattered so much. The secure terminal in her quarters offered limited access to Alliance databases, most requiring clearances she didn't possess. Her attempts to access information about classification metrics were repeatedly blocked. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. The screen displayed text only. Northern Maintenance Corridor, 3rd Junction, 0200 hours. Come alone if you want answers. No signature, no trace of the sender. Elena considered the risks. This could be a trap, or it could provide the information Earth Command needed. Either way, ignoring it wasn't an option. The station's night cycle brought dimmed lighting and reduced activity. Elena moved through the corridors with purposeful steps, dressed in simple civilian clothes rather than her uniform. She disabled the location tracker in her official communication device, leaving it in her quarters while carrying a basic scanner that might detect surveillance or threats. The Northern Maintenance Corridor was utilitarian, bare metal walls with exposed conduits and minimal lighting. Elena counted junctions until she reached the 3rd, a 4-way intersection with access panels on each wall. "You came?" The voice belonged to Vern, who emerged from shadows so perfectly that Elena wondered if the technician had some form of camouflage capability. "Your message was compelling," Elena replied, keeping her voice low. "What answers are you offering?" "Not just me," Vern gestured, and 3 other beings stepped forward. Elena recognized one as a technician from the environmental control room. The others were unfamiliar, one resembling a humanoid with crystalline growths along its limbs. The other a compact, heavily muscled being with multiple eyes, ringing what might be ahead. "This is dangerous for all of us," said the crystalline humanoid, its voice creating harmonic overtones. "I am Shri, Records Division. This is Technician Morva, indicating the multi-eyed being. And you've met Technician Raal in environmental control." "Why risk meeting me?" Elena asked directly. "Because your arrival accelerates existing plans," Shri answered. "Earth's classification wasn't an accident or a scientific assessment. It was a political decision." Elena felt a chill. "Explain." Vern's mandibles clicked anxiously. The classification system began as legitimate scientific protocol. Worlds were categorized by objective danger levels: atmospheric toxicity, predator lethality, geological instability, and so forth. But, over time, continued Raal, its voice a series of modulated clicks, the Grand Council began manipulating classifications to maintain power balances. Higher classifications mean greater restrictions, but also greater privileges in certain domains. Military and security domains, Shri clarified. Species from higher-rated Deathworlds are granted expanded defensive capabilities under Alliance charters. "And Earth being classified at level 12, Elena began. "Is unprecedented," Vern finished. "No world has ever rated above 9 under objective criteria. Earth is dangerous, certainly, but not to that degree." "Then why?" The 4 aliens exchanged looks that Elena couldn't interpret. "We believe," said Shri carefully, "that certain council factions want to use humans as enforcers. Your species' reputation preceded you. Adaptability, aggression when threatened, remarkable survival instincts. If they can control human representatives, they gain powerful agents while maintaining plausible deniability. And if they can't control us? Then the extreme classification provides justification for extreme measures." Morva spoke for the first time, its multiple eyes blinking in sequence. "Containment, restrictions, potentially even quarantine of your entire system." Elena absorbed this, mind racing. "You're saying Earth was set up, either to be used or to be contained?" "Precisely," said Vern. "And the classification data was falsified to support either outcome." "I need proof," Elena said firmly. "Earth Command won't act on unsubstantiated claims from unknown sources." Shri extended a crystalline arm. A small data device glinted in its hand. "Partial access codes to the classification archives. Not enough to download files, but enough to view them from secure terminals." A pause. "The nearest such terminal is in the Biological Sample Repository, Level 42, Eastern Quadrant." "That's a restricted area," Elena noted. "Yes." Vern's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. But environmental technicians can authorize temporary access for biohazard inspections. I've scheduled one for 0600 hours. You'll have 30 minutes before security protocols reset. Elena took the data device. Why are you helping me? What do you gain? Reform, said Shri simply. The alliance began with noble intentions. Mutual protection for species from challenging worlds. Some of us remember those ideals and wish to return to them. Peliki's faction has dominated for too long, added Ral. They manipulate classifications, restrict technology transfers, and maintain power through artificial hierarchies. And if I'm caught? Elena asked. We never met, Vern replied. The inspection authorization is legitimate. If questioned, you were simply lost. A common occurrence for new station residents. Elena nodded slowly. I understand. Thank you for the risk you're taking. As the group prepared to disperse, Morva stepped closer. One more thing, Captain. Trust no one outside this circle, especially not Ambassador Krill. They report directly to Peliki's inner council. With that warning, the group separated, each taking different routes back to their designated areas. Elena returned to her quarters, the data device concealed in a hidden pocket. She had 4 hours until the inspection window, time to prepare and to consider the implications of what she'd learned. If these allegations were true, Earth had been maneuvered into a dangerous position. The classification system was being weaponized, and humans were either pawns or targets. Neither option was acceptable. At 5:45 hours, Elena left her quarters dressed in the standard uniform of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. She'd carefully studied the station schematics accessible through her terminal, plotting the most direct route to Level 42 that avoided major security checkpoints. The biological sample repository occupied a significant portion of Level 42, its entrance marked by warning signs in multiple languages and symbolic formats. As Elena approached, she activated her official identification beacon, which should now correlate with Vern's inspection authorization. A security scanner hummed as she passed through the entrance. For a tense moment, Elena thought it might reject her credentials, but the barrier field deactivated with a soft chime, allowing her to enter. The repository was a vast, climate-controlled space with hundreds of containment units arranged in concentric circles. Each unit housed specimens from Alliance member worlds, plants, microbial cultures, tissue samples, and even some preserved life forms. The air held a sterile scent, underlaid with unfamiliar biological odors that her filtration mask couldn't completely block. Elena moved purposefully toward the eastern section, where Shri had indicated a secure terminal would be located. She passed containment units labeled with alien script, some emitting soft glows or containing swirling mists. One held what appeared to be a miniature ecosystem, a self-contained jungle with tiny creatures moving through dense foliage. The terminal stood at a junction between two major sections, its interface dark until Elena approached. She placed her palm on the scanner, allowing it to read her diplomatic credentials, then carefully inserted Shri's data device into a port beneath the main screen. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered to life, displaying access options in Alliance standard script. Elena navigated to the classification archives, using the partial codes to bypass security protocols. The classification database was vast, centuries of accumulated data on thousands of worlds. Elena used the search function to locate Earth's file, conscious of the minutes ticking away. The file opened to reveal a comprehensive assessment, far more detailed than anything Earth had been provided. What she found confirmed her worst suspicions. Earth's original assessment, conducted secretly during humanity's early space exploration period, had rated the planet at level 7. Dangerous, certainly, but within normal parameters. That rating had been artificially elevated 3 times over the past 50 years, each increase coinciding with council leadership changes. The most recent adjustment, raising Earth from level 9 to level 12, had occurred just months before the invitation to join the Alliance. The authorization bore Paliki's personal security code. More disturbing were the attached strategic assessments. One document outlined the containment benefits of bringing humans under Alliance jurisdiction, citing the need to monitor and regulate a potentially destabilizing species. Another discussed utilization protocols for human representatives in high-risk intervention scenarios. Elena downloaded as much data as she could to her secure device, aware that each transfer increased the risk of detection. She had just completed a copy of the original classification metrics when an alarm sounded, a soft, pulsing tone that grew progressively louder. "Unauthorized data access detected," announced an automated voice. "Security protocols initiated. Please remain at your terminal for identification verification." Elena removed the data device and closed the access screens. She had maybe 2 minutes before security personnel arrived. Quickly, she activated the inspection program that Vern had authorized, making it appear she'd been conducting legitimate work. The repository's entrance hissed open. 2 security officers entered. One, a species Elena recognized as Krills. The other, a heavily armored being with what appeared to be natural weaponry protruding from its exoskeleton. "Captain Maris," said the Krill officer, 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "You're accessing restricted data systems." Elena straightened, projecting calm authority. "I'm conducting the scheduled biohazard inspection. Perhaps you received an alert because I accessed Earth specimen data? I wanted to verify containment protocols for our indigenous samples." The officers exchanged glances. The armored one consulted a device on its forearm. "Inspection SB-427 is indeed scheduled. Authorization, Technician Vern." "However," added the Krill officer, "sample data doesn't require security-level access. The alarm indicated classified information was viewed." Elena shrugged slightly. "The system directed me to verify classification metrics as part of the inspection protocol. I followed the prompts. If that triggered security protocols, perhaps the system needs adjustment." The officers conferred quietly, their translators deactivated. Finally, the Krill officer turned back to Elena. "Your inspection authorization remains valid for another 15 minutes. Complete your work and return to diplomatic quarters." A pause. "This incident will be logged." "Of course," Elena replied smoothly. "I appreciate your diligence." The security team remained at the entrance, watching as Elena performed a theatrical inspection of several containment units, particularly those housing Earth specimens. She made notes on her datapad, occasionally frowning thoughtfully at readings. When her time expired, she nodded respectfully to the officers and exited the repository. Her heart pounded, but she maintained a composed expression as she made her way back toward the diplomatic section. Instead of returning directly to her quarters, Elena took a circuitous route through public areas, using the opportunity to scan for surveillance. Her diplomatic training included counterintelligence techniques, and she employed them now, changing directions, entering crowded spaces, even pretending to shop at a vendor stall, selling environmental adapters. Satisfied she wasn't being actively followed, Elena sent a coded message to Vern using a public communication terminal. Inspection complete. Maintenance issues noted for follow-up. Back in her quarters, Elena secured the data device in a diplomatic pouch, protected by Earth treaties from being searched without specific authorization, and began composing a report for Earth Command. The evidence she'd gathered confirmed a deliberate manipulation of the classification system for political purposes. The question now was how to respond. Direct confrontation seemed unwise given her isolated position. Earth's delegation was small, their influence within the Alliance still minimal. Yet allowing this deception to continue posed significant risks to human autonomy. A message alert interrupted her thoughts. The screen displayed a formal notification. "Your presence is requested at Emergency Council Session, Grand Chamber, 1400 hours. Topic: Earth Classification Review. Elena stared at the screen, mind racing. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Either her unauthorized access had triggered more serious protocols than the security officers indicated, or something else had happened to precipitate this sudden review. She had 3 hours to prepare. Not enough time to receive guidance from Earth Command, which meant she would need to make decisions that could affect humanity's interstellar relations for generations. First, she needed allies. Elena composed a carefully worded message to Vern. Advisory meeting requested regarding biological containment standards for upcoming council presentation. Your technical expertise would be valuable. The response came within minutes. Advisory team available at 1300 hours. Maintenance office 37B. Next. Elena reviewed everything she'd downloaded from the repository. The classification manipulation was clear, but she needed to understand the specific metrics that had been falsified. Several biological and environmental factors had been dramatically exaggerated. Earth's predator lethality index, atmospheric variability tolerance, and most significantly, the sentient threat assessment that measured a species' capacity for organized violence. By the time she left for the meeting with Vern's group, Elena had formulated a strategy. Risky, certainly, but the alternatives seemed worse. Maintenance Office 37B was a cluttered space filled with equipment parts and diagnostic tools. Vern, Shri, Ral, and Morva were already present, along with 2 new allies, a hulking being with a crystalline exoskeleton introduced as Security Officer Draz, and a diminutive, multi-jointed creature called Analyst Perry. Your data access triggered secondary security protocols, Vern explained without preamble. The classification system automatically notifies certain council members when records are viewed without full authorization. Which explains the emergency session, Elena noted. Partially, said Perry, its voice surprisingly deep for its small size. But something else has happened. Grand Chancellor Paliki called for a full security review of Earth's delegation immediately after the repository incident. They're moving faster than anticipated, Shri added. Our sources indicate Paliki's faction intends to use this session to formally implement containment protocols for humans, citing security concerns. Based on what justification? Elena asked. Your unauthorized access, combined with falsified risk assessments that they themselves created, Draz rumbled, crystalline structures grinding as it spoke. A perfect circular argument. Elena nodded grimly. Then we need to break the circle. I've studied the classification data. The manipulation is obvious when compared to objective metrics. Presenting that evidence would be problematic, Morva said, multiple eyes blinking rapidly. It would confirm you accessed restricted files. Yes, Elena agreed, which is why I won't present it directly. Instead, I'll challenge the classification using Earth's own scientific data, which, as a diplomatic representative, I'm authorized to reference. They'll dismiss external data. Ral clicked skeptically. Council protocols require verification through alliance standards. True, Elena smiled slightly. Which is why I need your help. Can you access the original measurement protocols? The baseline standards used for all classification assessments? Shri's crystalline structures glinted. Potentially. Those are archived in the central database. And can we transmit data to the Grand Chamber display systems during the session? Vern's mandibles clicked in what Elena had come to recognize as amusement. Maintenance controls environmental and technical systems throughout the station, including council chambers. Good. Elena outlined her plan quickly. It relied on technical precision, timing, and the assumption that at least some council members would recognize blatant manipulation when confronted with it. The group spent the next hour preparing, each taking specific responsibilities. As the session time approached, Elena returned to her quarters to change into formal diplomatic attire. The data device remained secured in her diplomatic pouch, a last resort if all else failed. The Grand Council chamber was filled to capacity when Elena arrived. Representatives from all member worlds occupied their designated positions, with additional observers in the upper tiers. Grand Chancellor Paliki presided from the central platform, flanked by senior advisors including the Serpentine advisor Paliki. As Elena took her position in the Earth delegation's small section, she noted the unusual security presence, at least twice the normal complement, positioned at all exits. Ambassador Krill approached, 4 eyes studying her intently. "Captain Maris, this session concerns serious matters. I hope you're prepared to address the Council's concerns regarding Earth's commitment to Alliance security protocols." "I am prepared to represent Earth's interests faithfully, Ambassador," Elena replied evenly. "See that you do." Krill's skin rippled in patterns that suggested tension. The consequences of defiance can be significant. Before Elena could respond, a resonant tone signaled the session's commencement. Grand Chancellor Paliki raised 4 limbs in the traditional gesture that called for silence. "Representatives of the Deathworld Alliance," Paliki's amplified voice filled the chamber. "We convene this emergency session to address security concerns regarding our newest member, Earth. Recent incidents suggest a troubling pattern of non-compliance with established protocols." Elena remained outwardly calm as Paliki detailed the repository breach, characterizing it as a deliberate attempt to access classified information. Several council members shifted uncomfortably at the accusations, while others nodded in apparent agreement. "In light of these concerns," Paliki continued, "the Security Committee recommends implementing Level 3 containment protocols for all human representatives until a full review can be completed." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Level 3 containment would essentially place Elena and her staff under house arrest, with all communications monitored and movement restricted to specific areas. "The justification for these measures," added Advisor Paliki, stepping forward, "is further supported by Earth's extreme classification. As a Level 12 Deathworld, human representatives present unique security challenges that require heightened vigilance." Elena activated her communication signal, requesting speaking rights. A light flashed on the central platform, indicating her request. Grand Chancellor Paliki seemed momentarily taken aback, but recovered quickly. "The Council recognizes Captain Elena Maris, Earth representative." Elena moved to the speaker's position, acutely aware of hundreds of alien eyes focused on her. Everything depended on the next few minutes, and on her allies performing their roles perfectly. "Honored representatives of the Deathworld Alliance," she began, her voice steady. "I stand before you not to dispute the seriousness of protocol adherence, but to address a more fundamental issue: the accuracy of Earth's classification." Whispers erupted across the chamber. Classification challenges were rare and typically handled through bureaucratic channels, not council sessions. "Point of order," interrupted Advisor Paliki. "Classification metrics are not subject to debate in general session. This matter should be redirected to the appropriate committee." "With respect," Elena countered. "When classification is used as justification for restricting diplomatic privileges, it becomes a matter of immediate council concern." She gestured toward the main display screen. "I've prepared a brief presentation of relevant data." Before objections could be raised, the screen activated. Vern's team had successfully accessed the chamber's systems. The display showed a comparative analysis of planetary conditions, using the Alliance's own baseline metrics. "Earth is undeniably a challenging environment," Elena continued, as the data scrolled across the screen. "But our measured planetary conditions align most closely with Level 7 classifications based on Alliance standards." The display shifted to show side-by-side comparisons with other member worlds. Atmospheric composition, predator lethality index, geological stability, all these metrics place Earth within parameters similar to these established Alliance members. Paliki's advisors huddled in urgent consultation, while representatives throughout the chamber studied the data with varying degrees of surprise or confusion. "This presentation is unauthorized," Advisor Paliki declared, moving toward the central controls. "Security, terminate this display." But at that moment, the screen changed again, now showing the original classification report for Earth, dated nearly a century earlier. The Level 7 designation was highlighted, along with verification signatures from the original assessment team. Elena smiled inwardly. Shri had come through. "This is the original classification report," she explained, voice raised to be heard over the growing commotion. "Conducted by Alliance scientists during humanity's early space exploration period. As you can see, Earth was accurately classified as Level 7. Grand Chancellor Paliki surged forward. "These are restricted documents. This display constitutes a serious security breach." "On the contrary," Elena replied calmly. "As Earth's diplomatic representative, I have the right to access historical records pertaining to my world. Nothing in Alliance charters prohibits discussion of a planet's own classification history." She gestured, and the screen changed again, now showing the 3 subsequent reclassifications, each with minimal scientific justification but bearing Paliki's authorization codes. "The question before this council," Elena said into the stunned silence that followed, "is not whether I accessed data I was entitled to review, but why Earth's classification was artificially inflated without scientific basis." Chaos erupted. Representatives from multiple worlds rose, demanding explanations. Security officers looked uncertainly toward their commanders, awaiting orders. In the center of it all, Grand Chancellor Paliki's scales had darkened to a deep purple, a sign of extreme agitation. Ambassador Krill pushed through the crowd toward Elena. "You have no idea what you've done," they hissed. Translator, barely keeping up with their agitated speech patterns. "Paliki's faction controls critical Alliance functions. This challenge will not go unanswered." "Perhaps not," Elena agreed, "but it can't go unexamined either." On the main platform, Advisor Paliki had taken control of the situation. "Order! The Council will have order." The chamber's acoustic systems amplified the command, dampening the uproar. "Captain Maris has raised serious allegations," the advisor continued once the noise had subsided. "However, presenting restricted data in this forum violates multiple security protocols. I move that the human delegation be confined pending investigation." Several council members signaled agreement, but others indicated opposition. The division was clear, and more balanced than Elena had dared hope. A representative Elena didn't recognize activated their speaking signal. The being resembled a massive cephalopod suspended in a hovering tank of swirling liquid. "The Council recognizes Representative Zhou Lai of Hydros Prime," announced Advisor Paliki reluctantly. "This Council cannot vote on containment, while the underlying issue remains unaddressed." Zhou Lai's translated voice echoed through the chamber. "If Captain Maris's evidence is accurate, it suggests classification manipulation at the highest levels, a direct violation of Alliance founding principles." Murmurs of agreement spread through sections of the chamber. "I propose," continued Zhou Lai, "an immediate independent review of all classification data, supervised by representatives from multiple factions." A pause. "And I further move that Grand Chancellor Paliki recuse themselves from this process, given their apparent involvement in the reclassifications." The chamber erupted again, this time with procedural motions and counter-motions flying between representatives. Elena stood firm at the speaker's position, watching as the carefully maintained power structure began to fracture around her. Security Officer Draz moved to her side, crystalline exoskeleton glinting under the chamber lights. "Advisors loyal to Paliki are calling for emergency measures," he rumbled quietly. "We should move you to safety until the situation stabilizes." Elena shook her head slightly. "If I leave now, it validates their security concerns. I need to see this through." On the main platform, Grand Chancellor Paliki had recovered enough to take command again. The massive being raised all 6 limbs, an extreme gesture rarely used, except in dire circumstances. "This session is suspended pending security review," Paliki's voice boomed over the clamor. "All representatives will return to their designated areas. The human delegation is confined to quarters until further notice." Security officers moved toward Elena, but they were intercepted by representatives from several worlds, creating a buffer zone around the Earth delegation. "The Chancellor cannot unilaterally suspend proceedings during a legitimate challenge," called out another representative, a tall, slender being with features that reminded Elena of Earth's deep-sea creatures. "Council protocols require a vote." More voices joined in support. The chamber had divided into clear factions, those supporting investigation versus those backing Paliki's authority. In the midst of this growing standoff, Ambassador Krill suddenly stepped onto the central platform. Their skin had shifted to a deep, royal blue, a color Elena hadn't seen before. "As senior representative of the Founding Worlds Coalition," Krill announced, voice cutting through the disorder, "I invoke Article 7 of the Alliance Charter, Emergency Council Restructuring." The chamber fell silent. Article 7 was the Alliance equivalent of a vote of no confidence, a nuclear option in political terms. "Given evidence of classification manipulation affecting multiple worlds," Krill continued, eyes fixed on Paliki, "I call for immediate suspension of the current council leadership pending full investigation." Elena hadn't expected this. Krill had seemed firmly in Paliki's camp during all previous interactions. She caught the ambassador's eye, receiving the slightest nod in return. "Article 7 invocation requires seconding from 20% of member representatives," Advisor Paliki stated, voice tight with strain. One by one, representatives from a dozen worlds signaled their support, each activation light appearing on the central display. When the count reached the required threshold, a deep tone resonated through the chamber, the system's acknowledgement of a valid invocation. Grand Chancellor Paliki's massive form seemed to deflate slightly. "This is unnecessary and disruptive. The classification system has served the Alliance for centuries, and will continue to do so," Krill replied firmly. "Once its integrity is restored." They turned to address the full council. "I propose an interim oversight committee, comprised of representatives from all major factions, to manage Alliance affairs during the investigation." The motion passed with surprising speed. Whether from genuine concern over the revelations or opportunistic power repositioning, enough representatives supported the restructuring to make it veto-proof. Within an hour, the political landscape had transformed. Grand Chancellor Paliki and key advisors were relieved of duties pending investigation. An interim committee was established, with Ambassador Krill as temporary chair and representatives from 7 worlds, including Earth, as members. As the emergency session finally adjourned, Elena found herself surrounded by a mix of allies and newly declared supporters. Vern's maintenance team had dispersed, returning to their positions throughout the station to avoid drawing attention to their involvement. Ambassador Krill approached Elena as the chamber emptied. "An impressive gambit, Captain Maris. Reckless, but effective." "Thank you for your support, Ambassador," Elena replied carefully. "It was unexpected." Krill's skin rippled in what might have been amusement. "I've served on the council for 87 cycles, long enough to recognize when reform is inevitable." A pause. "Some of us have waited decades for an opportunity to challenge Paliki's faction. You provided the catalyst. Then our interests aligned fortunately." "Indeed." Krill's 4 eyes studied her intently. "Though I wonder if you realize the full implications of today's events." "Perhaps not," Elena acknowledged. "I focused on addressing the immediate threat to Earth's autonomy." "You've done considerably more than that." Krill gestured toward the chamber, now empty except for security personnel. The classification system has been the foundation of Alliance power structures since its founding. By exposing its manipulation, you've undermined centuries of political architecture. Architecture built on deception, Elena noted. Yes. Krill's skin shifted to a thoughtful green. The question now is what replaces it. The Interim Committee's first task will be establishing new governance protocols. A meaningful look. Earth's representative will have significant influence in that process. Elena understood the implication. You're suggesting I use this position to advance Earth's interests? I'm suggesting, Krill replied carefully, that moments of restructuring present rare opportunities. How you use this one will shape humanity's place in interstellar relations for generations. With that cryptic advice, Krill departed, leaving Elena to consider the rapidly evolving situation. What had begun as a simple investigation into Earth's classification had triggered a fundamental shift in Alliance power dynamics. She needed to contact Earth Command immediately. The developments far exceeded her authority as diplomatic liaison. Yet, she also recognized the unique opportunity Krill had identified, a chance to establish humanity's role on more equal terms than might otherwise have been possible. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of emergency committee meetings, diplomatic negotiations, and secured communications with Earth. The initial chaos gradually resolved into a structured transition process, with the Interim Committee establishing working groups to address specific aspects of Alliance governance. Elena found herself appointed to lead the Classification Reform Initiative, a position that placed her at the center of the most contentious debates. The task was monumental, redesigning a system that had defined interspecies relations for centuries. Working closely with scientists, diplomats, and representatives from diverse worlds, Elena developed a framework that maintained classification for legitimate safety purposes, while removing its use as a political tool. The new system would require transparent metrics, regular independent verification, and, most controversially, equal voting rights regardless of classification level. Resistance came from expected quarters. Species that had benefited from higher classifications opposed changes that might diminish their status. Administrative factions loyal to Paliki attempted procedural delays. Yet momentum for reform proved difficult to contain, especially as investigations revealed that Earth wasn't the only world whose classification had been manipulated. On the fourth day, Elena met with Vern and the others, who had helped expose the truth. They gathered in a quiet corner of the station's botanical garden, a neutral location, less likely to draw attention. The Interim Committee has approved preliminary reforms, Elena informed them. Classification will continue, but without political implications. Safety protocols will be based on objective criteria, rather than arbitrary levels. A significant achievement, Shri noted, crystalline structures catching the artificial sunlight. Though implementation will face challenges. Always, agreed Vern. Reform is never complete, but foundations matter. What about Paliki's faction? Asked Morva, multiple eyes scanning for potential observers. The investigation continues, Elena replied. Several key advisors have already been removed from positions of authority. The Grand Chancellor remains under restricted movement protocols, pending formal hearings. And Earth status? Ral clicked softly. Reclassified to level 7, consistent with objective measurements. Elena smiled slightly. Though I've discovered many species find even that level intimidating. As they should. Vern's mandibles clicked in amusement. Humans have proven themselves a formidable addition to the Alliance, just not in the way Paliki anticipated. The conversation continued, touching on ongoing reforms and potential challenges. When the others departed, Elena remained in the garden, taking a moment of reflection before her next committee meeting. Ambassador Krill found her there, approaching with their characteristic fluid movement. The Planetary Cooperation Act passed final review, they announced without preamble. 17 dissenting votes, but insufficient to block implementation. That's excellent news, Elena replied. The act formalized many of the reforms they'd been developing, creating a more equitable framework for interspecies cooperation. Indeed. Krill settled beside her on a bench designed to accommodate various physiologies. You've accomplished more in 1 week than many representatives achieve in decades. With considerable help, Elena acknowledged, including yours. Krill's skin rippled in patterns suggesting complex emotions. I've served the Alliance for most of my life, watched it drift from its founding principles toward something less worthy. A pause. Perhaps I should have acted sooner. You acted when it mattered, Elena said. That counts for something. Perhaps. Krill's 4 eyes studied the artificial landscape. The question now is where we go from here. The classification system was flawed, but it provided structure. Some species are genuinely more dangerous than others, a reality that cannot be wished away through political reform. True, Elena agreed. But danger and value aren't mutually exclusive. The reform system acknowledges biological realities while rejecting artificial hierarchies. A delicate balance. Krill turned to face her directly. One that will require ongoing maintenance. The Interim Committee's mandate expires in 30 days. Elections for a permanent council will follow. Elena nodded. Earth Command has authorized me to stand as candidate if nominated. You will be, Krill stated confidently. Your actions have garnered significant support across multiple factions. A meaningful pause, including mine. I appreciate that, Ambassador. Not Ambassador much longer, Krill noted. I've served sufficient cycles. Time for new perspectives. Their skin shifted to a contemplative blue-green. But before I step aside, I have a question for you, Captain Maris. Of course. Humans are indeed from a challenging world. Your species has demonstrated remarkable adaptability, resilience, and, when necessary, formidable strength. Krill's eyes focused intently on her. Yet you've channeled those traits toward reform, rather than dominance. Why? Elena considered the question carefully. It revealed much about how other species perceived humanity, and perhaps explained some of the fear that had motivated Paliki's faction. Because true strength isn't about domination, she finally replied. It's about building systems that benefit everyone, including those with less power. Earth's history taught us that lesson, often painfully. An unusual perspective among apex species, Krill observed. Maybe that's why the Alliance needs us, Elena suggested. Not as enforcers or threats, but as bridge builders between different kinds of strength. Krill's skin rippled in what Elena had come to recognize as thoughtful consideration. An intriguing possibility, one worth exploring as the Alliance enters this new phase. They sat in companionable silence for several minutes, watching as various species moved through the garden, some flying between elevated platforms, others gliding along water channels, a few navigating specialized pathways designed for their unique forms of movement. It's a remarkable achievement, Elena said finally, gesturing toward the diverse beings. Different worlds, biologies, evolutionary paths, all coexisting in shared space. Yes, agreed Krill. Perhaps that's the Alliance's true purpose. Not ranking dangers, but overcoming them together. Their skin brightened. A principle worth preserving, even as systems change. 2 weeks later, Elena stood on the observation deck where her journey had begun. The station looked the same at first glance. Crystalline spires jutting from industrial sections, holographic banners rippling across walls. Yet subtle changes were evident to those who knew where to look. Classification markings had been removed from public areas. Security protocols had been standardized across species. Most significantly, the Grand Council chamber had been redesigned. Its tiered seating replaced with a circular arrangement that emphasized equality rather than hierarchy. Elena's communication device chimed softly. A message from Earth Command. Her appointment as permanent representative had been confirmed, along with authorization to accept a council position if elected. The vote was scheduled for the following week, with preliminary polling suggesting strong support across multiple factions. A second message followed, this one from Vern. Maintenance complete. Systems functioning as designed. Recalibration successful. Elena smiled at the coded confirmation. The reforms they'd implemented were taking hold, gradually transforming Alliance operations at every level. There would be challenges ahead, certainly. Centuries of ingrained hierarchies wouldn't disappear overnight. Some would resist change, while others might attempt to create new imbalances. Yet, for the first time since Earth had joined the Deathworld Alliance, Elena felt genuine optimism about humanity's place within it, not as feared outliers or political pawns, but as equal partners in an evolving coalition. As if summoned by her thoughts, Vern appeared beside her, mandibles clicking softly in greeting. "Contemplating your handiwork, Captain." "Our handiwork," Elena corrected. "None of this would have happened without you and the others." "Perhaps," Vern acknowledged. "Or perhaps it merely would have happened differently, later. The system was unsustainable. Change was inevitable." "But the nature of that change wasn't," Elena pointed out. "That's what we influenced." "True." Vern's compound eyes glinted. "And speaking of influence, the election committees have finalized the candidate lists. You face only token opposition for the council seat." "Good news," Elena replied. "Though governance will be more challenging than reform." "Always is." Vern's mandibles clicked in what she now recognized as philosophical amusement. "Perfect systems don't exist, but better ones do." A pause. "Which reminds me, we've completed the sample recalibration in the repository. Earth specimens now stored under Level 7 protocols. All documentation updated." "Thank you." Elena gestured toward the grand promenade below, where representatives from dozens of worlds moved in patterns that seemed less segregated than before. "What do you think they'll say about all this a century from now?" Vern considered the question. "That depends on what happens next. Revolutions are judged by what they build, not just what they dismantle." "A fair point." Elena straightened her diplomatic uniform, still uncomfortable across the shoulders, but somehow more fitting now. "Then we'd better build something worth remembering." As they looked out over the station, this improbable collection of species from worlds that should, by all logic, never have found common ground, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought her here. What had begun as a simple diplomatic posting had evolved into something far more significant. An opportunity to reshape humanity's relationship with the cosmos. The Deathworld Alliance had invited humans with ulterior motives, expecting either useful pawns or manageable threats. Instead, they'd found partners who challenged their fundamental assumptions and catalyzed long overdue changes. Perhaps that was humanity's true strength, not our adaptability to harsh environments or our capacity for aggression when threatened, but our persistent belief that systems can be improved, that cooperation can triumph over hierarchy, that different kinds of power can complement rather than dominate. If so, the Alliance might indeed come to regret inviting humans aboard, but not for the reasons they'd anticipated. Because revolution, once begun, rarely ends where its instigators expect, and humans, as Paliki's faction had belatedly discovered, were very good at revolution. Elena smiled at the thought and turned toward the council chambers. There was work to be done,